proud of these young survivors for what they're going to share with us. The story is actually pretty simple. We know that young people who get sent to congregate care facilities are being abused, are being mistreated. And often families don't know about it. They don't know what's going on. They see these glossy brochures. They say, this is something that may be good for our kids. We were talking with Paris and her mother, so courageous of her mother to come here today to be with her. And she said, in the holidays, everything looks fine. They dress up the place, decorate the place for Christmas. The parents are totally clueless. And then what is going on in these congregate care facilities? Solitary confinement of young people, abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, psychological manipulation, depriving people of basic food, depriving them of decency, kindness. This is happening in our country to our young people. And if it can happen to Paris Hilton and her family, think about all those people who can't be here today. Communities of color, gender and sexually diverse communities, working class communities, who are shuttled into these facilities, told a bunch of lies about them, and then are scarred for life. One of the things that surprised me after Paris had the courage to do this and people read about us being here, is I started having a couple people I knew, not well, texting me, emailing me saying, Ro, thanks for doing this. Here's my story. This happened to me. Now, I didn't know about any of this really till I talked to Paris. I was clueless about how much abuse is taking place. So this is a bill, this is not a messaging bill. This is a bill we need to pass. And we need to pass it in the House and the Senate in a bipartisan way to have basic rights for America's kids who get sent to these facilities so that they are treated with dignity and respect. And we will pass this bill. We have the power right here to get this done through the House, and we're going to get it through the Senate. And I'm confident and hopeful that the President will support it. So with that, I want to turn it over now to Senator Jeff Merkley, who is such a leader on so many progressive causes, for his perspective, and I'm very grateful for him being here and for his leadership. Senator Merkley.
Ro, I'm really pleased to partner with you on this because it boils down to this, that congregate care without oversight becomes congregate abuse. And that's what we discover all too often when we look into the system. I want to point out Sarah Gelser, who is here from Oregon. Sarah, where are you? Over here. Sarah Gelser is a real champion for children in Oregon, and she became the driving force behind Oregon Senate Bill 171 to say, let's reform this system. Let's shut down congregate care facilities that are engaged in abuse of our children. Let's stop the system of shipping children out of state to facilities that have no oversight. Let's establish a Bill of Rights for how these facilities need to operate. And I want to thank her for that and for the vision that was established in Oregon as a foundation for what we're working on nationally. And our two youth members who have come to share their stories, Caroline and Uvea, who's from Oregon. So delighted to have your courageous voice in this undertaking. What is the bill going to do? Well, it creates a national Bill of Rights for congregate facilities, protect our children in congregate facilities. It creates a commission with the Department of Justice to be able to do the research, to require the reports, to assemble the data, to establish best practices, and set up a system of oversight and accountability. And it provides grants to states to be able to implement these improvement measures. That would be a tremendous reform, improving the lives of hundreds of thousands of children across our country. So, I'll turn it over to those with expertise. A special thank you to you, Paris, for sharing your story, because your advocacy and shining this spotlight is going to improve the lives of so many children and set them on a better course in life. So this is a tremendous reform and one we must get past, and we will get past. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. I now want to introduce the chair of the Appropriations Committee. Nothing gets done in Congress if you don't have Rosa DeLauro's blessing, so it's a big honor to have her here. Representative DeLauro.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ro, and I want to say good morning to all, and I want to say a thank you to my colleague, Congressman Ro Khanna, for his generous introduction, but being the MC this morning, but his interest in this critical issue. I want to also acknowledge my colleagues, Senator Merkley, Congressman Adam Schiff, for joining us and for sponsoring the Accountability for Congregate Care Act. Thrilled to be here with Paris Hilton, and the senators sent it well. You're using your platform to make this known around the country. Shining a light on this is critical, and we thank you for your courage in speaking up. To Aubrey Edwards-Luce from First Focus, who is here, and the Executive Director of the National Disability Rights Network, Kurt Decker. Of course, I say a thank you to the institutional abuse survivors who have courage in telling their stories. Not an easy thing for you to do. For the child welfare advocates for lending their voices for this important cause. And I want to salute your efforts in support of breaking code silences. Their mission to create a future without institutional child abuse, engaging, uniting, empowering adult survivors to become advocates. You make a difference. You create the change we need in this world. And I am proud to be your partner in this fight. Last month, I had the pleasure of talking with Paris about the Accountability for Congregate Care Act, which is critical legislation that would, for the very first time, legally define child abuse and neglect in institutional settings by establishing the Youth in Congregate Care Bill of Rights. This bill would provide funding to states to establish life-saving measures and infrastructure to help youth in these settings, would help to prevent the abuse and the neglect of over 120,000 young people in congregate care facilities across this country, and significantly reduce the usage of congregate care overall. I am honored to chair the Appropriations Committee and honored to chair the Health and Human Services Education Subcommittee. And therefore, I am committed and pledge my support to working with my colleagues to ensure that the resources that we need are available, to ensure that we are protecting our most vulnerable children and our teens, those disadvantaged by issues such as family separation, by trauma, and help to bring about a fairer, more equitable future for everyone. For far too long, there has not been adequate oversight when it comes to developing congregate care best practices and reporting procedures. This bill changes that. It authorizes funds that will enable states to collect data, to guide policy responses, provide training for state officials, social workers, mental health professionals, and judicial employees. It develops much-needed regulations and meaningful oversight that ensures that there are proper mechanisms for victims to be able to report their experiences, to seek justice, the justice that they deserve, and to see those finally in place. That is why I'm so proud to stand with Paris and all of the survivors here today. We need to use this moment. Let's use this moment to lift up all children and troubled teens so that every person, no matter their background, has an opportunity not just to survive, but to heal and to thrive. This is where all of you come in. Congress is an institution that responds to external pressure. You are the external pressure. Keep speaking up and speaking out. Make your voice heard, raising this awareness and lending your voice to this cause. We will keep fighting Let us keep making our voices heard, because together, as the senator said, we can and we will get this done. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this effort this morning.
Thank you, Representative DeLauro, and for your great advice. I'm now honored to introduce one of the most brilliant members of Congress, Adam Schiff, who can really help make the intellectual arguments for this bill and make it sound reasonable, as he does with every argument he makes. Representative Schiff?
I definitely don't deserve that introduction, but I'm grateful, Ro, and I'm grateful for your leadership. As a parent, nothing is more painful than seeing your child suffer, except perhaps the realization that you cannot help them, that you must turn to people outside your family for help. It's a realization that I've never had to endure, but one that so many families face, a realization that leads them to put their faith in residential programs that purport to counsel children. But behind glossy pamphlets and promises lies a dark truth, with a reality of abuse, mistreatment, neglect, torment, and trauma. This was the experience survivors of these facilities, including the brave individuals standing next to me, know all too well. For too long, bad actors in the troubled teen industry have been allowed to prey on desperate parents and vulnerable children and make child abuse their business model. We cannot allow that to continue. Many children leave these facilities more traumatized than they were when they arrived, and some don't leave at all. Between 2000 and 2015, more than 80 children died in troubled teen facilities, dying from starvation to strangulation to suicide. Lives cut unimaginably short by an industry that has gone without regulation or consequence for far too long. We cannot bring these children back, nor can we erase the scars inflicted on hundreds of thousands of survivors. But we can ensure that no child ever again suffers at the hands of these facilities. And that's precisely why we are here today. Representative Khanna's legislation will codify an essential Bill of Rights for children in these facilities, establishing a standard of care that cannot be violated with impunity. It will ensure that every child has their fundamental rights protected and their needs observed. And it will break the cycle of trauma that has plagued these institutions for far too long. And we will work with these survivors and advocates to push legislation to set minimum standards and crack down on offenders. I want to again thank Representative Khanna and Senator Merkley for their leadership, and I want to thank Paris for your extraordinary leadership. Caroline, Sixto, Uvea, and all other survivors who have spoken out for their remarkable courage in coming forward to share their stories. Your strength gives comfort to your fellow survivors and hope to families praying for an end to this nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Schiff. It's now my honor to introduce Aubrey Edwards-Luce from the First Focus on Children, who has really been a great leader on children's rights in our country.
Good morning. My name is Aubrey Edwards-Luce, and I'm the Senior Director for Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice Policy at First Focus on Children, which is a national, bipartisan nonprofit that works to make children the priority in federal policies. As a former lawyer for court-involved kids, I was trained to persuade people with power to prioritize the experiences and well-being of my child clients. In a political environment that is actively ignoring the multifaceted needs of children, I want to give my heartfelt appreciation and applause for all the Congress members who are here today for choosing to prioritize the humanity and well-being of all of our children by supporting the Accountability for Congregate Care Act. So long as structural accountability is lacking, institutional abuse will continue to hurt children in congregate care settings. Ending institutional abuse requires us to stop allocating different levels of protection to children based on the systems that bring them into congregate care, and to start seeing all children as our children. It doesn't matter whether the child was dropped off via a private transport or a foster care caseworker or a juvenile court worker. Institutional abuse is an unacceptable collateral consequence of congregate care. And that being said, there is an additional moral tragedy that happens when children in the juvenile justice system who've been deemed a risk of harming themselves or their communities are then becoming victims of institutional abuse while in congregate care. too many places that are meant to keep our children safe are actually pulling them deeper into experiences of trauma and violence. Far too often, the abuses that justice-involved youth experience in congregate care are shrugged off, and they're coupled with statements like, they have to learn their lesson, or it's for their own good. The lessons that these young people, who, mind you, are endowed with every bit of beauty and brokenness of their non-justice-involved peers, are learning is that people are expendable, that they're meant to be controlled by any means necessary, and that abuse is an acceptable tool. For any child that is hearing this today, I need you to know that these are lies. You have a right to safety, education, and privacy. First Focus on Children supports the Accountability of Congregate Care Act as the right first step for Congress to take so that our government can institutionalize more protections for children rather than institutionalizing the children that our government is trying to protect.
Thank you, Aubrey, for those words. I'm now honored to introduce Kurt Decker, the leader of the National Disability Rights Network and a true leader on disability rights around the country. Thank you so much, Kurt, for being here.
Good morning. As Congressman Khanna said, I'm Kurt Decker, the Executive Director of the National Disability Rights Network, and I'm honored to be here today with Congressman Khanna, Senator Merkley, Congressman Schiff, and Congresswoman DeLauro, and really thank them for their leadership on the introduction of the Accountability for Congregate Care Act. I'm also deeply honored to be with the survivors who are willing to speak out on this issue. Just last week, my organization, the National Disability Rights Network, published a very troubling report that found serious abuse and neglect at for-profit youth facilities in treatment in 18 states. Notice I said for-profit. Our investigations across the nation found children with broken bones, children housed in vermin-infested buildings, children subjected to isolation and shaming, and children who experienced sexual assaults from supposed trusted staff. In some of these facilities, children quite literally do not receive enough food to grow normally and are forced to take powerful drugs without medical oversight. Clearly, this problem is not isolated, nor is it the result of a few bad actors. It's nationwide and systemic, and requires federal action to protect the children sent to these awful facilities, because thousands of children continue to go to them despite their abysmal track record. Parents and government agencies, as you've heard, get misleading advertising and marketing, and they believe they are sending their children to state-of-the-art facilities where they will receive high-quality care. The truth is that in many situations, the children receive no care at all. It's a fairy tale designed to keep the money flowing and profits high. This must stop now. We must bring these children home. Our report would not have been successful without the heroic survivors who spoke out and told us what was happening to them. Thank you again to the brave young people and to Paris Hilton speaking out here today. My advocacy network, the Protection Advocacy Network, will continue to shine a light on the youth residential facilities industry that failed you and all the children who deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. It's now my honor to introduce Sixto Cancel from Think of Us, which uplifts and empowers the voices of survivors, particularly children who survive.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sixto Cancel, and I'm the founder and CEO of Think of Us. I first entered foster care as an 11-month baby because my mother struggled with drug addiction and poverty. At the age of 6, I returned to her care but didn't stay there long. By 7, I found myself back in foster care. At 9, adopted, and it was a pretty abusive adoption. So by the age of 13, I was couch surfing, and I was disconnected from the 10 siblings that I have. When I finally found one of my siblings, he was in a group home. And there were times when I couldn't talk to him because he didn't earn enough points to be able to have a visitation call. There were times where I would talk to him and he would tell me that a staff member secluded him. He would tell me that a staff member restrained him, that the scars on his body, my body, are a direct result of the abuse that the child welfare system has inflicted. we conducted a report to understand what are the experiences that young people are having in these institutional placements. And what we learned were that young people told us that not only did they experience physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, but they told us that they were disconnected from the people that they were supposed to be in connection with, people who loved them, people who were supposed to be there with them, denied visitation, denied phone calls, denied healing, denied the right to be able to thrive. As we further investigated, what we realized was that our young people, our teenage young people in foster care, 3 out of 4, 75%, will experience a group home placement on their first night. If group homes and institutions are supposed to be an intervention, why is the state using it as a result of not having enough foster homes? Black children are more likely than their white peers to be placed in group home settings. The consequences are especially severe for LGBTQ young people who are overrepresented in foster care. Nearly 6 in 10 LGBTQ youth in out-of-home placement have spent some time without stable housing, who spent time without stable housing said that they had actually experienced institutions. One study found that 65% of LGBTQ young people experiencing homeless had lived in foster homes. Lived in group homes. The lack of support for enough foster homes, enough kinship care placements, this shortage of foster parents are driving states to use these institutions unfairly. Our young people are being abused in it, and we need regulation to change that. In the most recent available data published in 2020, there was over 43,800 children living in foster care in an institutional placement here in the United States. Black youth are disproportionately placed in institutions. And just as when I was a child, group homes are being used as these temporary and long-term shelter options instead of putting young people with family. This bill calls for a Bill of Rights, but more importantly, it calls for dignity, so that if you are abused, if there's something that happens to you that shouldn't happen to you, that you have the right to speak and that someone is obligated to answer. Too many young people have shared their stories with us and told us the horrid nightmares. But what's worse is when you can't hold people accountable for those experiences. We are grateful to the members of Congress who are here, grateful to the other survivors, grateful for Paris Hilton and all of the other advocates who are tirelessly advocating so that we can not only have a voice in the Bill of Rights, but that we are required to do enough research so that when a child is restrained, when a child dies, that we could actually know that number. Because today, we do not know that number. I want to thank everyone here for their tireless advocacy, not just for the organizations, but on a personal note, on behalf of the almost half a million young people who've experienced foster care. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sixto, for that very powerful statement. I'm now especially honored to introduce our next speaker, Uvea Speza-Lopin. She's 12 years old, a survivor from Junction City, Oregon. And what courage to come here to speak today. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you.
I was grabbed, thrown to the concrete ground, and put in a headlock. I was 9 years old. Hello, my name is Uvea. I am now 12 years old. I have been in foster care on and off since I was a baby. For the past 6 years, I've been a ward of the Juvenile Court in Oregon, and have been in 15 placements ranging from homes to institutions. I am here to put my dream in motion. I want to prevent further harm from happening to anyone else at these facilities. When I was 9 years old, I was told I was being sent out of state to Acadia, Montana, a residential treatment facility, to get help for emotional challenges. The moment I walked into the facility, I knew it wasn't a home. I was physically abused numerous times at Acadia, Montana. One time, a staff member grabbed me by my shirt, threw me to the concrete ground, and put me in a headlock, leaving a 4-inch bruise on my forearm. I was put into a locked seclusion room, where I remember coughing up blood and not getting any help. Another time, a staff member pulled my arms into restraint, pulled me onto her lap, and then she yelled at me and called me a pervert. When I was on suicide precautions, male or female staff would watch me in the shower and make me feel really uncomfortable. They took everything from me, including my clothes, making me change into orange and blue scrubs and sleep in a bare room with only a mattress on the floor and a scratchy pillow with no pillowcase. These are just a few things I went through and what a lot of kids in institutions like Acadia experience. Being in a residential treatment facility did not help me. It only caused more trauma and gave me more reasons not to trust. It made me feel more helpless, knowing I had no way of telling anyone outside the facility what I was experiencing. I had to wait until my mom visited me so I could whisper it to her, because my phone calls were monitored. The first time I flew in an airplane was to get dropped off in Montana. The second airplane trip was to come here to D.C. I hope the whole Congress and President all decide to pass this law to help make sure no more children have their childhoods ripped away from them, like mine was. Thank you. And Ella, if you're out there, I'm doing this for us.
Well done, Uvea. Thank you for that very moving statement.
Thank you.
I'm now honored to introduce Caroline Cole, who is a survivor herself and the Director of Government Relations for Breaking Code Silence. And Breaking Code Silence has just been such an incredible partner with our office, Emma Preston in our office, and thank you for all you've done to help shape this legislation. Caroline?
Thank you all for being here today. As Representative Khanna mentioned, I'm a survivor of this industry, and I'm also the Director of Government Relations for Breaking Code Silence. We are a survivor-led nonprofit, and we were born out of the collective cry for change around youth residential treatment centers. I'm here today not just as myself, but on behalf of thousands of individuals with lived experience of these facilities. I asked them what they wanted Congress, President Biden, and the rest of the world to know. And this is what they told me to tell you. These experiences of abuse are not just reserved to a few bad actors. It truly is institutional. It is systemic. It affects every state and every community. We need accountability and transparency now. We need solutions. And this means honoring that young people in our nation have the right to safety, to well-being, and the right to opportunity to have a future that isn't marred from preventable trauma. These survivors want you to know that lives are being destroyed right now, and that we haven't even begun to understand the impact of the kind of torture that's taking place in these settings as we speak. They emphasized to me that no matter what that child did or didn't do to get into a facility like this, that they never deserve to be treated less than human, to be made to endure the most unspeakable assaults on who they are and on who they're becoming as they enter adulthood. They want me to tell you today that what they really needed was community. What they really needed was family. What they really needed was security. And today, what they need from you is to listen and to act. For 2.5 years in the facility that I attended, I was not allowed to talk. I wasn't allowed to move freely or to make facial expressions to acknowledge anyone around me. This was called treatment. Silenced to the world and left to turn inside myself. I had nothing but time to dream and to think. I dreamt of not only living without the permanent changes that institutionalization has caused me in my life, but I dreamt of this day when I and thousands of others could break our silence and see the change that could have saved us, our families, and our futures. Thank you. And thank you to everyone here who has put in a tremendous amount of work.
Thank you, Caroline, for that beautiful statement. I'm now honored to introduce the person who has convened us all to be here, Paris Hilton. I'll just say this because she needs no actual introduction, that what struck me most in my conversation with Paris Hilton was she said to me, of all of her achievements, of all the things she's done, this is by far what matters to her most. And so her dedication and commitment to this cause is remarkable, and I'm confident she will have an impact that will help the lives of hundreds of thousands around this country. Paris?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Good morning. Today I come here not as Paris Hilton, but as a survivor. I want to start by thanking the other survivors speaking today, Caroline, Sixto, and especially Uvea. You are incredibly brave for sharing your personal experiences of abuse publicly and for turning your pain into a purpose to create real change in the world. Senator Jeff Merkley and Congressman Khanna, thank you for your leadership in sponsoring the Accountability for Congregate Care Act and for your commitment to ending abuse in youth congregate care facilities. I am confident that this bill will create a world where all youth have the support and opportunity they need to heal, thrive, and not just survive. And thank you to Chair DeLauro and Congressman Schiff for joining us and offering your support for this bill. It means the world. For 20 years, I couldn't sleep at night as memories of physical violence, the feeling of loneliness, the loss of peers rushed through my mind when I shut my eyes. This was not just insomnia, it was trauma. One night when I was 16 years old, I woke up to two large men entering my bedroom, asking me if I wanted to go the easy way or the hard way. Thinking I was being kidnapped, I screamed for my parents. And as I was being physically dragged out of my house, I saw them crying in the hallway. They didn't come to my rescue that night. This was my introduction to the troubled teen industry. My parents were promised that tough love would fix me and that sending me across the country was the only way. I was sent to 4 facilities of almost a 2-year period, and my experience at each one haunts me to this day. I was strangled, slapped across the face, watched in the shower by male staff, called vulgar names, forced to take medication without a diagnosis, not given a proper education, thrown into solitary confinement in a room covered in scratch marks and smeared in blood, and so much more. At Provo Canyon School in Utah, I was given clothes with a number on the tag. I was no longer me. I was only number 127. I was forced to stay indoors for 11 months straight. No sunlight, no fresh air. These were considered privileges. Children were regularly hit, thrown into walls, and even sexually abused at Provo. I wish I could tell you that what I experienced to witness was unique or even rare, but sadly it's not. Every day in America, children in congregate care settings are being physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. Children are even dying at the hands of those responsible for their care. Just last year at Lakeside Academy in Michigan, 16-year-old Cornelius Frederick was restrained by 7 staff members for over 12 minutes and later died from suffocation. Why? Because he threw a sandwich in the cafeteria, and for this, he died. The multi-billion-dollar troubled teen industry has been able to mislead parents, school districts, child welfare agencies, and juvenile justice systems for decades. The reason is a system-wide lack of transparency and accountability. It's clear that the state-by-state patchwork of limited, weak oversight and inconsistent licensing requirements is not working. Federal law and funding are desperately needed to bring real reform and true accountability to congregate care in America. I'm proud to stand here today with my fellow survivors and advocates, Senator Merkley, Congressman Khanna, Congressman Schiff, and Chair DeLauro, to announce that the Accountability for Congregate Care Act will formally be introduced in both houses of Congress. This bill creates an urgently needed Bill of Rights to ensure that every child placed into congregate care facilities is provided a safe and humane environment. This Bill of Rights provides protections that I wasn't afforded, like access to education, to the outdoors, freedom from abusive treatment, and even the basic right to speak and move freely. If I had these rights and could have exercised them, I would have been saved from over 20 years of trauma and severe PTSD. Imagine if it was your child who was suffering abuse, neglect, or death in the name of treatment. Wouldn't you do everything in your power to protect them? Ensuring children are safe from institutional abuse isn't a Republican or Democratic issue. It's a basic human rights issue that requires immediate attention. On behalf of hundreds of thousands of institutional abuse survivors across America, I urge Congress and President Biden to make this bill the law of the land and give young people in congregate care the rights and protections they so desperately need and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Paris. I think we have time for a few questions for any of the survivors or for any of my colleagues if people have any questions.
Congressman, any potential roadblocks you see here, anything that you're worried about the industry being able to push back on?
I'm confident once we hear the stories of the survivors and once people see what's in the bill that we have a very good chance of getting this passed, and so far we haven't seen any opposition. If you want to chime in at any point. Sure. We are working on doing that. We've had good conversations with Representative Bacon, and he and his staff have been very engaged and thoughtful about it. And so we're hopeful that we will be able to get that support. All right. Well, I appreciate so much everyone coming, and thank you for your interest. Thank you again to all the survivors and my colleagues for their presentations. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you come and speak, Elise?
On climate now. See,